Bruchim Habayim. Thank you for making it out. I want to begin with a special shikar to all those that are mishtatif and we steht na yom ratem and ashtat mekiloyin, helping with the tamula and in Yane and hafatzas and arbatzas in Yane Taharas Hamishpacha, befrat to our presenter and the founder of the Badatz of Taharas Habayis, the Asra and our Shchuna, Rabbi Braun. It's a kavod and a schus that he's here, giving of his time today to be with us on the subject of Harchakos. I want to thank all those that were mishtatif, also begashmis and technish, in publicizing, encouraging others to come. Once it's already happening, kedai to be marbetar Rabbi Yisrael. And there's also papers you'll find near where you are that have the coming weeks on the various additional noisim in this general subject of Tara that we're going to hear from very special presenters. And now, without further ado, the Badatz of Crown Heights.
When it came to planning what the subject of the shiur would be, there was two proposals that I was given. One proposal was to go through all the halachos of Harchakos, and the other proposal was a specific list of questions which are not clearly spelled out in Poskim and Achronim and Malaktim v'chulu, and to go through those questions. So I mentioned to the Ma'arganim at the time that it's impossible to do both. I can't cover all the halachos, the basic halachos of Harchakos, and also deal with these list of 15, whatever amount of questions it was. But I'm probably not going to do either. What do I mean I'm probably not going to do either? It's in the short span of time that we have, I don't think we can cover all the halachos of Harchakos. In Shulchan Aruch it's found on one siman kuf tzadikei, but as soon as you start learning the Shulchan Aruch with the Taz and the Shach and the Pischei Tshuva, never mind you start learning all the later achreinim, this becomes a full-on intensive shiur. I'm not talking about lamdas, just to know the halacha l'maisa, and there's so many dvarim mishtanim, so many details that change. So this is going to be a small taste of Harchakos, a chazorah, and hopefully for some people, and some it'll be new stuff. Although Harchakos are one of those areas in Hilchos Nida that's probably a good idea to review on a regular basis. Pais can say that it's important that a sheikh should go through the halachos of shchita once a month. Go through, there's a particular sefer that sheikhtim use called Simla Chadasha, Smach. Seifrim go through the regular halachos of safars, have to go through regularly, because otherwise you could start making mistakes. And married people have to go through the halachos of Hilchos Nida regularly, specifically Harchakos. Because Harchakos affect you on a day-to-day basis. Wherever you move, it's how you eat, it's how you sleep, it's how you dress, it's everything that you do throughout the day. And it's so extreme that in one half of the month, none of this is relevant, and another half of the month, whatever you do makes a difference. So Bechlal Nida is the same as, similar to all other arayas, all other forbidden relations, that is the chi of karas. But there's so many differences between Nida and other arayas that some things that are permissible in other arayas are forbidden with Nida, and some things that are forbidden in other arayas are permissible with Nida. One klal when it comes to Harchakos is that you have to have a bit of seichel. It's a klal in kol HaTorah kula. But in Harchakos specifically, we have to have a bissel seichel. You have to have a bit of balance and to know ven yeh and ven nisht. It's important during at all times is a halacha oiva kegufa, oiva kegufa mechabda yosem megufay. A man is supposed to love his wife the way he loves himself, respect her more than he respects himself. That's part of the requirements of a husband to a wife. And that applies even when she's in Nida as well. The Gemara says if somebody sleeps, kol hayoshim bekila, if somebody sleeps in the room where there's a husband and wife sleeping, olav hakasav omer neshei ami tergarshin mebeis tanugah. It's a terrible thing that you're actually taking away the pleasure of husband and wife because you're sleeping in their room. What do you mean sleeping in the big deal? They're sleeping in the room. She's a nida right now. There's nothing that can go on. Afilu b'ishtei nida, because there's a certain relationship that husband and wife have that exists at all times. To quote it's not actually a medrash, but it's often quoted as if it's a medrash. It's a later invention as if it's a medrash, but it's a good one. I tried to research this one. I think the first person that coined this phrase was Reb Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. Every teacher in Hilchos Nida says the medrash zakt, and on the pasuk basi legani achosi rayasi, achosi rayasi, Pam shiachosi, pam shirayasi. The relationship with the husband and wife sometimes is like a brother and sister. No, I'm not talking in terms of pulling hair. And sometimes it's like a husband and wife. So a brother and sister have a very strong relationship. And Chassidus, it says that one of the strongest relationship is avas achos. Chassidus talks about achosi, rayasi, the various different forms of ava. Achosi melashon ichui, ichui Alexandri, merging. When it comes to kriya, we say that there's a garment that was ripped and you want to sew it back together. There's different forms of sewing which are called ichui, achos. Achos is a natural love, and a natural love doesn't have any passion attached to it. An unnatural love, Chassidus says, like husband and wife, that has passion. And each one has a mile nechsan, nefshel kis, nefshel bahamas. I'm not going to go into all of that right now. So there is that relationship. It's just a different type of relationship. Paskim talk a lot about when it comes to Harchakos, kol hamachmer b'Harchakos hareizim meshubach. Normally when it comes to Hilchos Nida, we don't use the term kol hamachmer hareizim meshubach. In fact, the reverse is the attitude. Not in terms of the shoyl, but in terms of the Rav. When the Rav is asked a shalom Hilchos Nida, he looks at the matter like this, looks like that, and you tell him, okay, ich shall machmer sein. Chas v'sholom, etar nish machmer sein. So he's doing everything he can. K'dei l'tayr l'isha l'bayla. The Gemara says, David HaMelech got his hands dirty. Yodei melchlachas b'shvira v'shalya. K'dei l'tayr l'isha l'bayla. He did everything he can. L'tayr isha. Zog dal terebe. L'tayr daika. Not to get his hands dirty just to paskin. L'tayr really comes from the shalada's word. The Rav's job is to find a way to be metayr. Of course, al pi Torah. When it comes to Harchakos, you start reading Harchakos like, well, they're trying to just make life miserable for us. Is that what this is about? There might be an element of that, probably not. But the idea of Harchakos that is a meshubach fakert, to define if she's a nida or not, the Rav's job is to say that she's not a nida. Al pi Torah. Once she's a nida, as far as possible, because you're supposed to make Harchakos, even your own Harchakos place can say. Normally, you're not supposed to make up your own stuff. When it comes to Harchakos, it says, yeah, you can make up your own stuff. When I say making up your own stuff, that has to be defined, because sometimes place can use the lashon that some people are machmer and it's a shibush gomer. Shibush gomer means it's absolutely nonsense. Or another place can write chassidus shel shtus. Well, I thought you're supposed to make your own chumras. So what does it mean? Chassidus shel shtus. When it says that the chinuch writes, kol echad v'echad should make his own siyagim, a siyag means if you know there's a certain area, it's technically not on the Harchakos list, but I know for me that creates a mikshel. That's where it says every person should make themselves siyagim. If you're going to make yourself now a new rule, I invented a rule that during Harchakos it's probably not a good idea to speak in English. That's a mishagas. But if a person knows that you can't invent your own rules, that's shibush gomer. If a person knows kol echad ba'atzma, this is about any arayis. If a person knows that certain things, the lashon of Shulchan Aruch when it comes to erva, there's only 3 times in Shulchan Aruch this lashon. Tzarich l'israchik ma'hanoshin ma'od ma'od. L'israchik is a pretty strong statement. Ma'od makes it even stronger. Ma'od ma'od means good. Even when some people will tell you what you're doing is ma'od, amongst the ma'od you'll be even more ma'od than that. Why? Because it's ein apetrapis la'arayis. No one can control a person when it comes to erva. We have Yetzer Hara. And that Yetzer Hara exists in anyone, certainly in a case where it's libay gaspa, which is a very strong, healthy, hopefully a healthy relationship, husband and wife. Fakir, when people say, I don't understand Pshat and Harchakos, you tell them, I think you need to go to some counseling. Why don't you understand Pshat and Harchakos? That means something is wrong with your relationship. If you would have a decent, healthy relationship, then you would see that eating together is an experience. You would see that eating with kaida achas for sure. It's because the whole relationship is shot up. Something is wrong there. Whether you understand or you don't understand, you have to keep what the Torah says. Irrelevant. So I mentioned earlier that in some inyanim it's easy, and some inyanim it's more severe. So one of the classic cases, which is mutter for a niddah, but not mutter in any other erva, yichud and istaklos. You now have yichud with a woman that's an erva. You're allowed to have yichud with your wife. Istaklos, you're not allowed to look at any erva. You're not allowed to look at a woman in a way of istaklos. You're allowed to look at your wife. I'm not talking about mekaymis and mechusim. That's a whole different story. But on the other hand, there's none of these harchakos apply to any other erva. There's no halacha they're not allowed to pass things to a woman. I know some chassidish even are very particular, but that's not halacha of harchakos. And they'll go in the bank and they'll tell the teller, and the teller has no idea what they're talking about. I can put the money down. Yeah, that's not halacha. The Gemara says if somebody's martze mois miyada liyada, if somebody passes money, man and woman, not a husband and wife, And in Schaven Lihanis, but he's doing it because he wants to enjoy that experience, this flirtatious experience with another woman. There's Lo Yinaka Medina Shel Gehenim, it's a terrible thing. But technically, the etzem meaning that she's passing you something is not a problem. But with a wife, you're not allowed to pass anything. Why would they make it with yichud? Yarda Torah Sevdaita Shaladam. The Torah knows exactly how people are, and knows that they need to keep their Harchakos to balance them because yichud was permissible. They allowed yichud because it's impossible. What you can tell a person that can't live with his wife, be yichud. Twice, some husbands would love this, some wives would love this. Twice, once a month for 2 weeks, live in separate homes like they used to do in ancient times. The deeper reason why is because the Medrash says on the pasuk Suga b'Sheshanim, HaTorah Ida al Bnei Yisrael, the Torah testifies that Yidden would chas v'shalom never be nichshel. We're not worried you'll do yichud. That if you do yichud, it'll cause you to stumble. We're not worried. Because even if they have a small fence, b'Sheshanim, a fence made out of roses, that's a pasuk Suga b'Sheshanim, you're not going to go over the fence. The Torah says you're not allowed to. But the Torah knows you won't violate, but at the same time, once we allow you yichud, now you never know what's going to happen next. So therefore we put in all those harchakos. The other difference between a niddah and any other erva is their niddah, like we mentioned, is pas b'salei. It's on the one hand worse because libe gaspa, he has a strong relationship, but pas b'salei, he can't be with her right now, but in 2 weeks' time, she's going to go to the mikveh. Now, indeed, whenever there's no heter li'yisurei, if there's a case where she won't be able to go to mikveh in 2 weeks, that might change all the dynamics. I'll start with the Gemara. The Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos that there was a Talmud Echad that learned Mikra, Mishnah, Shimur Shem Chachamim. He had Shimush. And he passed away midlife, Chatzi Yamav. And his wife would take his tefillin because he would wear tefillin all day. And his wife went around to all the shuls and she said, "My husband, give me an answer. Why did my husband pass away young?" Kara, Shana, Shim Shem Chachamim. So one time, Eliyahu Navi stayed in her house. Now, if Eliyahu Navi is staying in someone's house, we're talking about obviously pretty chassidish Rebbetzin, pretty chassidish husband. And she told Eliyahu Navi the whole story. So Eliyahu Navi said, he passed away young. Okay, let's get straight to the chase. How did you act when you were in Nida? She says, Chas v'sholem. We didn't even touch. Be'etz b'ktana, just like a small touch. She says, okay, that's during Yemei Nida. What am I Yemei Libun? And when she's no longer flowing, but now it's during the 7 clean days. So we ate, we drank. According to one girsa, which is brought in Tosfos, if I remember correctly, Hevi li esapach, he brought me a jug. From here, a lot of the halachos of Harchakos we learned from various different girsas of this medrash. So the fact that he brought past something and they ended up touching, it seems like unintentionally. The Gemara says, Baruch, Eliyahu said, Baruch hamakom shahargai. The Eibishter didn't favor his Torah. Didn't say, oh, because he learns Torah, okay, I'll be okay with the fact they didn't keep Harchakos. Should our Torah amr vel nid isha v'nidas to masal sikrav, you're not allowed to get close to a nida. Now in the Torah, sikrav means relations, intimate relations. Or according to some shittas, it also means hugging and kissing, but it doesn't mean all the Harchakos. But the Gemara is extending it to all the Harchakos and says, lo sikrav, you can't get close at all. So long a woman doesn't count, does the hefsek and counts the 7 days, and does what she has to go through and goes to the mikveh, she stays in niddah. She could be a niddah that's 1,000 years old, an 80-year-old niddah, but she never went to the mikveh, she's still in niddah, and the husband has to keep all the harchakos. So let's go through Allah Seder. Obviously the first thing that's also with a niddah, Issa D'Raisa, is Bia, obviously. That says Befedish from the Torah. Isha b'niddas to masalei sikrav. An extension, what we call in halacha avizrayu darayis, an extension of erva, which is for every erva, including one's wife. Chibuk v'nishuk. Hugging, kissing, which is kidduv erva. That's a form of affection and closeness. Including that also is, but a step removed, is shina b'mita achas, sleeping in one bed. And then there's even further away from that is Harchakos, all the bunch of safeguards that were made that we shouldn't chas v'shalom violate Isser Nida. So I'm going to go starting with one of the first Harchakos, which is Negiah, touching. Now, when we talk about touching, we're obviously not talking about an affectionate touch, because affectionate touch is not Harchakah. That applies to any erva. Remember what we started in the beginning, that nida is different, that has special safeguards that even other types of erva don't have. So we're talking about negiya she'ena shel chiba, non-affectionate touch. Of them steht der Meise in Medrash, Meise betalmud echad, that passed away, and when he passed away, also another Talmud Chacham v'chulu v'chulu. These are all negative stories, I'm sorry, I don't know the positive ones. He had a lavai, he didn't even have a minion, and it wasn't COVID. Why? Because they touched. Touched, a non-affectionate form of touch. And as a lashon afilu be'etzba ktana, it's a small, minor touch just in the finger. Now, the halacha in terms of touching is that even if they touch each other using a garment, using an object, using blowing off dust, even if their clothing touch each other, that's also all considered a form of touching. They say stories of great tzaddikim that if they ended up, it depends on the size of the house. If you're living in a very, very small kitchen, it could happen very often, and if a woman is wearing those gowns, then it could end up touching their begadim in each other. So, of course, you have to be very cautious. To say about great tzaddikim that they actually fasted because b'shoige there was no intention whatsoever, there was a touch, and they fasted. I don't know if we're in that madrega, but certainly one has to be careful if you're flying. Practical example. So when you're on the bus, you might want to pick other places to sit, but when you're flying, you might not want someone else to sit next to you, both for practical reasons and for kedusha tznius reasons. You don't want to sit dafka next to some shiksa, right? You might be better off sitting next to your wife. So to say that a ruggle is anybody who, I'm not always, do you have choices that you pick an aisle seat, she picks an aisle seat, so you both have aisle seats and you're not sitting near each other and you're sitting near each other. At least in the aisle seat next to the shiksa. But yeah, not always do you have choices in these things. But sometimes when people are sitting near each other, especially when they fall asleep, and you're going on long flights, people can fall asleep. If you fall asleep, it could be negiya. One of them could have negiya, one is awake, one is asleep, v'chulu v'chulu. If you're touching a garment that she's not wearing, there's no isser in terms of ilchas nida, although just 2 days ago came out a new kunters of the Rebbe Harchakos of the Rebbe Rashab that he wrote on Rav Chaim Palajvi's Kaf HaChaim. There's some interesting things there. One of the interesting things there is that touching, the Rebbe Rashab writes, he's not talking, clearly not talking al pi halacha, but he's not talking, there's different categories of netilas yadayim. And one category that the Rebbe Rashab writes in this new kunters that came out from Ksav Yad is netilas yadayim l'taharas hamishpacha. Wash your hands in order to keep your mind clean and have taharas hamishpacha. So the Rebbe Rashab writes, b'chalal it's a good idea to always, frequently wash your hands. Someone told me he gave his wife to read this, and she said, I'm going to have to get you Vaseline. Anyhow, so it says there that the Rebbe Rashab said, when he touched her clothing, even shalei b'kavana, wash your hand. If you see hair of a woman, wash your hands. Now, in Hilchos Netilas Yadayim and Siman Daled, by no stretch of the imagination do we have any of these forms of Netilas Yadayim. It's not Ruach Ra, it's not Nekiyus, it doesn't have any of the rules. But this is a different type of Netilas Yadayim to keep your mind clear. Netilas Yadayim causes Taharas Hamishpacha. And if you do, could be anything which is remotely associated with any of hitter, the Rebbe Rashab wrote down for himself. I'm not saying, by the way, this is a Hirah l'Rabbim. I'm not saying this is something maybe the Rebbe Rashab did himself. I have no idea, but I'm just, the Bashgacha Pratis that came out, obviously it's similar, we can learn something from it, a lesson. So, but in terms of Hilchos Nida, there's nothing wrong with a husband touching his wife's clothing, although Poskim do say, and that's a classic example of Seichel Afman Haben, preparing her clothing, Dafka preparing intimate clothing, Lav Dafka is appropriate in terms of, because that could create a hitter. Touching an item that she's holding is also a problem because she's holding the item. Lighting a candle or lighting a cigarette, so she holds the match, you hold the cigarette, or vice versa, it could also be a problem. They're allowed to both be touching a table, that's not a problem. Poskim talk about a door. Clearly, sometimes there's doors that swing back, so Hamachmir and Harchakos, they open the door, and then they leave go, and it slams right into their wife's face. So there's ways how this could be done, but if not mutter. So you leave go for a second. there's no isser of, some people have suggested, maybe it's like throwing, right? I'm passing. So if I open the door and then she takes the door, so I pass something to her. That doesn't make any sense. You're talking about something which was mechuber, it's attached to the house. So you opening the door and then she takes the door, that's not a problem. And like I said, there's no problem with something which is fixed in one place, so you're both touching the same chair at the same time. Again, not in the way that causes hiru, not in the way that you're very close to each other, you end up touching each other, but the etzem in that you're both touching the same table or the same chair, that's not a problem. Lifting up an item together. So, I don't know if you remember, a table, sometimes, if somebody's touching the table and someone else is touching the table and sometimes the table shakes the middle, I don't think that would be any problem whatsoever. That's, the be'etzim is a heavy item. You're allowed to touch the bed, but you can't touch the blanket, which is on her, because that's like a garment. Another thing is lifting up an item together. Lifting up an item together is also if she's wrapped around in the blanket, awake or sleeping. I started saying about picking up an item together. So you're not supposed to be picking up an item together, but sometimes there's a carriage that has to be, you have to go down to the train station. So some men, because you're not supposed to pick up an item together, say, of course, you could do it all by yourself. So that's a violation of a different halach in Hilchos Surabiyah. Mechabed oivek gufay, mechabed yosem gufay, those halachas. Yeah, you're not supposed to be doing it together. You're supposed to do it all by yourself. Or you ask someone in a train station to help you, and a cook to do it, why you need someone else to help you. Say that, no. So busha and sneeze have nothing to do with Hilchos Niddah. What does Rav Moshe Feinstein write? He says, what's the embarrassment of being a Niddah? Everybody knows that. Every person becomes a Niddah once a month. What's there to be embarrassed about? Oh, that you're keeping Hilchos Niddah? You're embarrassed that you're keeping halacha? That for sure doesn't make any sense. So he says, well, what's the embarrassment? If there's a fire in the house, so you don't run out in pajamas because it's embarrassing. You'd rather burn, right? I mean, there's poison. So it's Rahman al-Islam. So embarrassment, big deal. Embarrassment is not a reason to change any rules in terms of Hilchos Niddah. So talking about holding a carriage, there's some place can find certain leniencies when it comes to taking a heavy item like a carriage, but b'derech klal, there's, like I said, the eight says you do it all by yourself. As part of the halacha of not touching, there's also the din of not passing. So, Pesach mentioned you're not supposed to pass because of chashash you can end up touching. And some say that the passing itself is a form of chibah. But this is, by the way, a general thing when it comes to Harchakos. The lumdus is not very, very clear. You have to go back to the Rishonim and a lot to the Siddur Tara, one of the Pesach Minchas Niddah, and understand the lumdus of each thing, why it's permitted and why it's forbidden. And very often it boils down to the same chikira, almost in every single topic. Is the act itself an act of chibah? Or the concern is, by doing this act, that will lead to chibah. It's maybe the hergel davar causes you to do other things. That's a general question in a lot of the Harchakos. Sometimes we say it causes hirurim, that's another aspect of Harchakos. So because the act itself is a problematic act, because it's a form of chibah, because it could lead to other things. Once you do this, it'll lead to other things, or because it's of hirur. And so let's go back to the passing, haishata, in Lashon HaPesachim. Haishata, the pashta psham is not because of chibah, because when you pass something, you might end up touching. But there is also the aspect of passing as a form of chibah, which is why even if you're passing a very, very long item, you're still not allowed to, even though practically if you're passing a stick to someone, how in the world are you going to be touching them if you're holding one end and they're taking the other end? It's not even shaykh v'metzias. You're still not allowed to. Sometimes we find you could do things with a shinui. Hopefully we'll get to that today. It doesn't apply to passing things. And one of the classic examples is at a chuppah, you need to put the ring on the collar, and if it's a chuppah snida, so how do you put the ring on her? Sai, you might end, there's not only the passing, you actually have to touch. That's the nature of the beast, excuse the expression. So, Pesachim talk about there's a lot of different svaras. In this case, it's not mamash yet your wife, that's a niddah. It's happening at the same time. She wasn't yet your wife. All the harchakos only apply to one's wife who's a niddah. Well, she isn't yet your wife. After you gave the ring, she became your wife. It's almost niddah harchakos bain ke'echad. There are techniques, whatever, but that's not negay for this crowd over here. Throwing. Poskim talk about throwing as well, and that's also a problem. Also, chashash, because it might lead to touching, but the main reason here, because it's self derech hibah. The tzemach tzedek, I'm going to keep on saying the word tzemach tzedek, I need to make this very clear. Then we have a sefer called Piskei Dinim of the tzemach tzedek. A large amount of that sefer was not written by the tzemach tzedek, it was written by there's a man who deserves respect in his own right, but it just happens not to be one of our Rabbeim, Rabbi Nachum of Vitebsk. And for some reason his manuscripts was printed together with Piskei Dinim. That doesn't take away, well, I can't say it doesn't take away from the chshivas, it does take away, but it doesn't mean it's less authoritative. This is a classic posik that exists from our circles, and what he wrote was accepted in our circles, so much so that it was confused, and it's still confused by many people. I'm just going to mention one interesting thing, that it is a Piskei Dinim and Taka and one of these simanim, and the Rebbe brings this Piskei Dinim, and he says it's a stira to an alter Rebbe, and the lashon of the Rebbe in the Sikha is, as a Mogdig Sikha, Yesh loimer shahat tzemach tzedek loy nachis. The Rebbe not only refers to the Sefer as Piskei Dinim Tzemach Tzedek, which wouldn't mean anything, that's just the name of a book, right? The Rebbe says, Hat Tzemach Tzedek loy nachis. Pshat in that I can't tell you, but it's the lashon the Rebbe uses. But it's al shem Tzemach Tzedek, it became part of the package deal. It's part of the Tzemach Tzedek. So we actually have this, on Harchakos, we very lucky that we have in the Piskei Dinim, not the Tzemach Tzedek, but in the Sefer of the Tzemach Tzedek, we have a whole section on Harchakos. So we don't have any Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch on that. There's so many simanim that we don't have no Alter Rebbe, no Tzemach Tzedek, no nothing. Here we have Rabbi Nachum of Vitebsk, printed in Piskei Dinim in a very clear way. And he has a lot of things that he mentions over there, which is good to know because it's not the way you learn in other circles. But for us, this is a Piskei Dinim. So he mentions over there that throwing something upwards, so that's one of the shtick that people do. You throw something up, not throwing to her, I'm throwing it up. And then she'll go later and catch it. So that's, the lashon is hamachmer tov el bracha, and that fits into the general principle when it comes to Harchakos, that hamachmer tov el bracha. One of the difficulties with passing is you need to give something over to your wife, and there's people around, and it is pretty embarrassing. So there's a minig that a lot of chassidim have, Beis Harav, Hanag of Kedusha, V'tara, Tznius. There's different rumors that Rebbe spoke about this to different people. That b'chalal, they keep Harchakos at all times. It's not a rule that you must keep it, and it's like if you don't do you're violating Minhag Chabad. That's also one of those rules I started off saying in the beginning of the shiur. Harchakos is one of the things I'm going to have from We're not talking about one of the official Harchakos. This is that even Yimei Tara, one of the ways that people shouldn't tell if she's a niddah, she's not a niddah, we never pass things. So people that halachos of Harchakos don't apply to them because she's past the age of Harchakos, because she's expecting, she's nursing, whatever it is, it's out the window anyhow. Lav dafka is this reason that people are going to tell her not to allow. Everybody knows that she's expecting right now. But in a time where there's yes and no, so you're going to eat by the shver and shviger, and now they see, you're passing, you're not passing. It's like all, so whatever, they never pass. So when you're standing in the street and you need to pass the keys to the house, so you don't have to worry about the fact that everybody is going to notice you're not passing it, right? Or when the seder is you put it down on something on a makom ptur, and then it falls onto the floor. You try to pass something and it falls down anyhow. So whatever. Even in Yimei Tara, in Yimei Tumi, you're not allowed to. Passing a baby is a problem also. You go get the baby. Now you have to pass the baby to her to feed. So, throw it up. Klap a maila. Hamach b'tov al bracha. Yeah, whatever. So you put it down. So you go to another room. That's another eight. You just go to another room and there's nobody around. But that's just harder. People actually talk about a svara that maybe a baby would be mutter to pass. It's based on a tashbitz, which a lot of poskim disagree with. The only problem is that it's misapplied as tashbitz. First of all, a lot of poskim disagree with the tashbitz. But secondly, the tashbitz is talking about a baby that could walk. Because he uses the svara of chayin noisei atzmei. People have extended this, I'm not sure how, to being a kvater by a bris. So they were offered a kibbut of being a kvater. So the easiest answer is, I'm not going to be there. I don't know when I'm coming. I can't do it. Let them guess whatever they want. One of the guesses is, could be she's in it. Could be she's expecting. We don't use kvata for someone's expecting. Could be anything. Could be they're in a fight. They don't want to come. Al kapanim, so one of the svaras people want to say, which is totally wrong, that with a baby there's a tzad kula and a kvata is a baby, but a baby that's the age of a bris milah can't walk. on their own. There's no such thing as chayin noisei esatzma. So even if you would take the shit of the tashbetz, that wouldn't apply. I mean, people do tricks. They put the baby down, do the same passing shtick, right? You put it down, the baby falls to the floor, and you pick it up, right? But was mit ankommen to the ganze Meise, you just don't take the kibbut of kvater. That is pretty much the standard accepted approach. That if a woman is a niddah, the husband just says you can't be kvater. People are looking for this gula of kvater, and therefore they want to have a baby. There's another gula that if you keep the halachos of Taharas Hamishpacha, it's even a bigger gula than being kvater, by the way. It works. Afilu, a tidik that's misrapik aleim, yes. There is a thing that if a kid walks by themselves, you're allowed to have a husband and wife walking with a kid. The only problem is that practically speaking, kids, when they're walking with a parent, they like lift themselves up and they try to do these swings, even when you're not thinking of that also. So anyhow, you're going to run into problems when you're doing that. The idea is why you be allowed to walk two parents with a kid. Like I said, it's not practical because at least the kids that I know are like that, and they're pulling themselves. But why are you allowed to? Because the isra of touching an object, hey, two of you touching one object, but the isra of touching an object is either when two people are doing an act with this one object they're touching, they're doing an action, or one of them is holding the object. When you walk with a kid, none of you, you're not doing anything with this object, the object is walking by itself. Object meaning kid. And none of you are holding the particular object. Yeah, if a wife is holding a baby, and now you want to go and give the baby a hug and kiss, which could also be a problem because she's holding the baby. That might be cut of linyana hitter. You want to feed the baby. The real problem is when you have to give a baby medicine. You have to give a baby medicine, and some little kids, it only works with two people. One holds them down, one ties their hands, the other one, whatever. Use some violence, whatever, force. That's where the problem is. There are certain kulas, but but like I said, but to feed a baby that she's holding, that's a very different story. Putting a baby into her lap, putting a baby on her blanket that she's wearing, you're allowed to put a baby on her bed, that's not a problem. Some of the inyanim of negiah are not asr al pi halacha, but that goes back to minaf ha-seichel. So technically there's no isser of holding an umbrella on top of husband and wife together. One of them holding the umbrella for both. There's no such isser. One of them is holding the umbrella, nobody's touching. But that comes seichel dafanab. It's almost impossible, or it's extremely difficult to hold the umbrella above two people without them touching each other. Now, if you have Mr. Shelach's umbrella, which is as big as the bigger chuppahs in 770, say that, then it wouldn't be a problem. This is what we call inyane zehirus. It's like, or reading a book together, learning from a sefer together. So Baruch Hashem, today's day and age, we have a lot of svarim. You could take two svarim off the shelf, or one of them uses their phone, another one uses the sefer. Learning from one sefer together and trying to benefit, it's almost lo yimala that you won't touch each other. So that's again, it's not a halacha that you're not allowed to learn from one sefer together, but seichel dafanab. Common sense is not so common. There is something that's mentioned as chumra de Rashi, shittas Rashi, and that is the isser of yeshiva al safsal echad. This actually has a makar in Medrash. Sfardim are not such chassidim of this chumrah, but Bnei Yisrael yotzim biyad ramah. There's a Medrash that says that the Eibishter and Yidden are like a niddah, and he can't even sit with us on one bench, some lashon like that. So we have the makar in the Medrash. But it's brought b'shem Rashi. What's the yisod? Why can't you sit on one bench together? Which isser is this? So if you look at the source of this halacha, the Turumas Hadeshim explains the logic, the science behind this halacha. So Meshach says that it's derech ha'oyevim v'areim lehizvaid yachad, if I bring together, they get together, they meet, and they sit on a bench. You sit on a park bench. You don't sit on a bench, two strangers don't sit on a bench together. It's just not the done thing. And with that, the Meshach makes a distinction between that and traveling on a wagon. In Shulchan Aruch, they found together the din of Safsel and the din of Agola. So he explains, again, the logic, that in a wagon, often you have strangers that come on the wagon. Oh, you're going to Vitebsk? Okay, I'll come along with you. So even today's day and age, when we have, everybody has their own car, but people go together in a car. In a bus, certainly people go together, right? Even if they don't know each other. But in a bench, it's a form of derech chibah, people sitting together on a bench. The Nukudas HaKesef, which is the shach. Some people, when they learn, the main thing they take out of everything they learn is the Nukudas HaKesef, the money. Anyhow, the Nukudas HaKesef is the chibur that the shach wrote on the Taz. Taz wrote a sefer called Tudei Zav. It's a lashon of a pasuk. Tudei Zav Nasalach Nukudas HaKesef. And the shach wrote comments on the Nukudas HaKesef. In the Nukudas HaKesef, he mentions two other theories behind the idea of sitting on a bench. He says it's like sleeping in one bed. Pretty extreme. It's like, this is a combination of the Taz and the shach together. It's like touching. Obviously, you're not touching, but it's like touching. Or it's hidur. Now, these are all extensions of what the Trumas Hadeshin explained. It is because it's a friendship way. What the category is, what classification we give it, those are various different reasons. So this halacha that you can't sit on a bench together is even if it's a very, very long bench, unless the bench is a fixed bench or it's a heavy bench. So we have a din, if it's fixed, attached, there's no, Eastern Parkway is fine. Yeah, whatever. It's just a separate issue if you're allowed to be sitting on Eastern Parkway and watching Shemitah Seinai, what's going on there. There was a couple in Crown Heights who used to always sit on the bench in Eastern Park. You just reminded me. And one of them would regularly write books. And he would come to visit the Rebbe and he would write everything that happened. So you would know that every time you pass by, you would dafka not want to walk on the service lane, because if you're passing by, he's going to start talking to you. Start talking to you, you're going to be in his book. So some people would dafka pass by, and some people would dafka not pass by. Anyhow, so a bench which is attached is not a problem, or even if it's safsel covered, koivdoi koivasoi, the very fact that it's heavy means it's considered attached. One eitzah that's brought in Poskim, if they're a bench and a husband and wife want to sit, they talk about a person sitting in between. La halacha, we paskin that you're not allowed to be sitting on the bench even as a person sitting in between, unless it's b'shas hatchak, in desperate situations. And this is important because there's situations where you don't have to sit on a bench, but you have to go somewhere, you're in a car, and then fang tzchana ma'isa. No, you two of you sit in the back. It's fine. You can sit together, husband and wife want to sit together. Yeah, but anyhow, so there's a heter of hefsek adam, and some places can make even when there's a hefsek of a object. I'll soon talk about why a car has one particular mila. So this is mentioned even in regard to a bench, but lahalacha we pass we b'shas atchak you're stuck, but lahalacha we're machmer even with a hefsek. Couches are modern day kind of bench. In olden days, there were benches. They're saf salam misnad. They're shakes. 770 bench. They all shake. So you mentioned the couch. One of the things about a couch is it's a whole new dimension to a bench. It's a soft leather bench, which wasn't around in those days. And over there, the problem is it doesn't shake. But when you're sitting in it and one person sits, the other person feels, each person feels when the other one is sitting. So it has the same problem of a safsla misnaded. The safsla itself is not misnaded, but the leather, cushion, and the leather covering is being misnaded non-stop. Separate cushions, then you don't feel each other. But if it's one cushion for everything together, that could be a problem. If I'm already talking about this, I'll mention something which a lot of people don't realize. Today, everybody has recliners in the house. I posted on the website, there's a whole arichas on this, on Aster Rav. But sometimes you have these recliners, and you have two people, husband and wife, and they're both, it's just two recliners attached to each other. So one is reclining on one, and one's reclining on the other one, but they're really attached, and they're really, it sounds far-fetched, but it actually is. They're really laying b'mitachas. That's what they're doing. They're on one item, and think about, make believe it's a bed, which is one bed and has a part like this, another part like that, and everybody's laying back. Well, it depends on the recliner that you're talking about. This is mamish, so these halach with two beds that are attached to each other. So that could be a problem. So there goes recliners. So the Mendel Wächter, his son told me once that his father said, was darf man so sagen? Will man liegen, darf man gehen schlafen. Will man sitzen, nicht da Bänkel. He doesn't understand why people invented recliners. No. Yeah, I'm about to talk about Nisiya. So Rabbi Yosef just asked a question. I actually this is the next thing I wanted to talk about. So we mentioned just now that a couch, you can feel each other's movements, and therefore that could be a safsel hamisnaded. But in Shulchan Aruch, right after the din of safsel hamisnaded, mentions the din about traveling by agola. And in Shulchan Aruch it says, in the Ramah, a difference if you're traveling for til or l'tzoyrich. And there's many ways how to learn this halacha. And I can't say all the different shittas how to learn this. There's a Sharei Tzedek, the Igris Moshe, v'chulu v'chulu. But I'm going to present one approach, and then we're going to talk about Lamaisa. One approach is that safsel is something that's usr. Traveling is something that's mutter. As I explained earlier from the Terumas Hadeshin, that safsel is a friendship thing that you do. Traveling is not a friendship thing. Travel is not derech oyev and vereim. Yeah, sometimes oyev and vereim are traveling, but also you could go and take a trip with non-oyev and vereim. Somebody asks you for a ride from the oil, you'll give him a ride if you have Ahavas Yisrael. That's not called oyev and vereim if you have Ahavas Yisrael, right? So it's a normal thing. People go together in a car. And a safsel is derech chibah. Therefore, when you're traveling in a car, in a agola, in those days in agola was misnadnid. It was shaky. It doesn't stay in one place. Or in a sfina, you're traveling in a boat. The boat shakes. Shakes a lot, even more than anything else. Not a problem because you're going litzrachav, you're going for a purpose. There's a special different din, in the end of the Terumas Hadeshin writes, in Miyu, however, if they're going leginis or pardesim and they're going in a wagon, derech til, as a enjoyment, leisurely trip, loy berirli lahater, it's not clear for me that would be mutter. The Ramah takes loy berirli lahater and Paskin said it's usr. But this is a whole new halacha. There's one halacha called safsel hamisnadned, a shaky bench. Traveling is not called a shaky bench. Oh, you're traveling with a til, it's a whole different isser. It's an isser of til. According to what I said just now, this is a moediger kula that I just now said. That means all the questions we will have, we're on the bus together, but the chair that we're sitting on is cushioned, and therefore we feel each other. So that's not derech oivim v'reim. You're not on a safsel, you're on a agola. An agola is only a problem if you're going derech til. Which is why, if a person is desperate, so you traveled, you went to a place, and you have to go back, and now you're from Philadelphia, you have to go who knows where, and they put you both in the back, and now you're stuck. What do? You scream, no, no. So you have what to rely on, you're going litzrachav. Now, you could want to make the heter better, do the hefsek thing, put their a bag or something, a chayfetz. But strictly speaking, there's strong room to be matter. Other people take a different approach altogether, and they say no. Touching, you're not allowed to either way. That says, even when you're going litzrachav, not allowed to touch. There's another approach altogether, that even when you're going litzrachav, there's still all these surim of safsel hamisnaded. That's not the normative pshat in the Shulchan Aruch. What is the definition of til? Til is a trip, a leisurely trip. Sometimes you want to take the kids out for a Chol Hamoed. As far as I'm concerned, that's the most opposite of til, right? It's like, oy vey, I have to go schlepp. I'm doing it just to be a nice tati for my kids. The welcome that you can't learn a Maimach Chassidus with a blood gemara, right? I'm not getting it. There's no fun in this. Being a director in campus, fun. A counselor taking kids on a trip. So, but if a husband and wife are going l'shem til, now a person can talk about what if one is going l'til and one is not. One is going l'tzrach and one is going l'til. I don't know where the shalom bayis is. Each one has different cheshbonos. I'm going for business. No, I'm not going. I don't care. I'm going l'til. So do you go after the husband, go after the wife? Or you machman only if both of them are doing it, or you make either way, even if one. But pashas, even if one of them is going l'til, it could be a chashash hergel davar, and it should be a problem. There is a svara that Harchakos says, which is not so 100% clear, but I mean, he wants to argue, which is a massive chiddush, that the isra of nasil til is when the trip itself is til. Not you're going for a til purpose. When the trip, there's fun in going on the trip. Now, I don't know too many trips that the trip itself is fun, only if you're going on a double-decker bus, or you're going through a safari, or you're going for a joy ride, yeah? But that means the typical trip that you're going, even though you're going with til, he argues, and this is some logic in that, the trip itself is not the fun. The fun is to get to Miami. Now we have to go through this oil to get to Miami. We would be born in Miami. So this is what he argues. This rayis against this svara, but he's the classic sefer that we have in Chabad on Taharas Hamishpacha, and that's how it's taught by a lot of Chassanim and Kala teachers. I'm putting it out there that this svara is nishuzay pashut, but that's definitely how it's in a lot of other modern day contemporary authors on Taharas Hamishpacha. Don't take this malach. I'm throwing out this svara out there. Til beregel is not called til. Til beregel means you want to take a walk. Shabbos nachan shalent. In Lubavitch, men and women would walk Shabbos nachan shalent. As I state in all countries of the Rebbe Shabbos, he speaks against it. People wasting away their time on Shabbos afternoon, boys and girls walking together, v'chulu v'chulu. But the concept, so I'm not saying that's what you're supposed to be doing Shabbos nachan shalent, but the very fact sometimes you do need a walk, sometimes it's important. You need to air out some issues, you need to sit and talk, the kids are listening, whatever the reason is. So til beregel is not part of the Isra of til. The Harchakos writes, other writes, ha-machmer kadesh yemerloi. If somebody is machmer, he doesn't even want to take walks together, kadesh yemerloi. But whenever it says lashon ha-machmer kadesh yemerloi, you have to know if it's a chumra de-asil de kula, or it's a chumra de-asil de chumra. So yeah, there's a room to be machmer, but your machmer of emes cheshbon. Why being machmer? What's going to lead to? It's a chumra, kadesh yemerloi. Now, are you a kadesh or not? I know we mentioned in the beginning, kol ha-machmer bar Harchakos harei ze meshubach. Right? So meshubach is a very important thing, but it's not aser medina, and it's important. Whenever we teach halacha, you need to know what's aser min adin, what's a minig, what's a chumra, and what's a chumra that's for balei nefesh, and who is a balei nefesh and who is not. Moving on to another topic, I'm limited in time. I have 7 minutes. We're going to go to the subject of achila. There's 3 isurim associated with eating. Now, you're allowed to eat, but there's 3 isurim associated with eating. There's machlokes about a lot of these things, but b'chlolos we take the position that when we talk about achila, it means any type of food is called eating, even a light drink. The 3, well, it was really 5 yisurim. It's 3 plus 2. One is you're not supposed to eat on one table. One is you're not supposed to eat out of one bowl. And one is not supposed to, a husband is not supposed to have his wife leftovers, and it doesn't work the reverse. Because that has to do with hirur and hergel dover, and the husband is the one that's always has the Yetzer Hara, not the wife. That's the rule. That's also the fact. Then there's 2 independent isurim to do with achila, to do with food, and that is miziga v'hoishata, miziga v'hanacha, pouring, preparing a food, preparing a drink, serving, and there's another isur l'shager l'shloach kois chashav, to send a very chashav drink for the and again only husband to wife. That's a 5th isur. Let me focus on the first 3 that I mentioned. Same table or same bowl or leftovers. And the 3 separate halachos have no shaykhs one with another, and that's why it gets pretty confusing. You could be eating out of the same bowl and not on the same table. How's it shaykh when you eat on the same bowl, not on the same table? There's no table. Alternatively, sometimes they go by these chasnas, they take a plate and they walk around, so everybody should be mekayim, the Indian of eating when you're standing, so they walk around with these, I don't know what they call these mishagas, these stuff that are fried in oil and really cause you serious stomach issues afterwards, in order that's to save money, that later by the main course you'll eat much less. So when they serve these stuff, husband's eating from the bowl, the wife is eating from the bowl. It's a bowl made for 5 people, it's one bowl, no table there. Then is halacha about eating shirayim, which is another halacha. You could have shirayim, which is not one bowl. So let me take the halachas one at a time. Let's start with one bowl. And again, we go back to the same principle that I mentioned in the beginning. Sometimes it's because it's derech chibah, and sometimes it's because it leads to chibah. One bowl makes no difference if they're touching each other, not touching each other. It makes no difference if they're eating at the same split second. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to say that halacha of eating out of one bowl is a split second, but 1, 2, 3, let's eat at the same time. So, even one after another, unless one of them decided, I'm not eating anymore. If one of them decided, I'm not eating anymore, so it's not called eating out of one bowl. But you can't say, okay, now I'm not eating anymore, now you're not eating anymore, now you won't eat anymore, now I won't eat anymore. That's the hakin shainik. Huh? Shiraim is another din, that's a separate din. Now, when it comes to that, sorry? Make a bracha, that's hilchas bracha achreina. So you have to make sure there won't be shiur, but that has nothing to do with this topic. A heker doesn't help for this topic. Makes no difference if there's a heker, there's no heker eating out of the same bowl. It doesn't make difference if there's other people there that are also eating. The heter is, you could take it off the bowl and put it into your own bowl onto a plate. When they're walking around, then sometimes there's no plates. But if it's a plate, you're not eating out of the bowl, you're eating out of your plate. So that's one of the simple eitzes. They put something on the table, and husband and wife both want to take from this middle bowl, take it out. It's another whole discussion. So the hand is, a lot of contemporary poskim say that the hand is considered, it's the same thing as a spoon doesn't help. You can't say, I'll take a spoon, stick it into this general bowl, and then eat from the spoon. The spoon is like putting your hand inside. So arguably, you could take from one hand and put it into the other hand. That's a big stretch, because that's considered, it's still not, you put it down on the table. Tables, but many poskim can maintain if you put it in your bowl, you put it on a table, that's not eating out of the bowl anymore. This has nothing to do, this is, kairach has nothing to do if it's big pieces or not. That's to do with other topics. With shirai, maybe we'll get to that. Right, and if both of them are eating off the plate, it's a problem. Unless you take off, there's 10 pieces of cake on this plate. So both are eating cake from this plate, it's a problem, unless one of them will take the cake and put it down. If you're putting on your plate, it's not a problem, we said. You put on your table, it's also not a problem. It doesn't have to be a salad. It could be like a bunch of pitzuchim. I don't know how you say this in English. No, raisins and nuts. No, yeah, a bunch of them. That has to do with the din of shirayim. I think we're mixing topics. Shirayim is where you're eating the other person's leftovers. It's not leftovers because they're separate pieces. But we're talking about the din of kairach, it's going to be a bunch of separate pieces. That's what Fedish in the Taz, about chatichas gedolos, but because you put it down on your place. So you have a basket of bread, and each person takes a piece of bread. That could be yeah. That's a problem, unless you put it down on the table. Now, where's it not a problem? When there's cream cheese, I'll take some cream cheese, you'll take some cream cheese. So first of all, lav dafka cream cheese is called a food. But even without that, where are you putting the cream cheese down? On your bagel. So you put it down on something, right? Some people are very machmer, they say, no, but you have to put the bagel first down on the table. Zol zayin. But Be'emes says, no, you put it down. But in theory, even the cream cheese would in theory be a problem. There's another issue which is called shulchan echad. Shulchan echad is, no, if you're putting a plate in your hand, what's the difference? It's not a problem. Also not. Then is it enough shulchan echad, not eating on the same table. I'm all problems I have to literally finish in 2 minutes because someone else is waiting for me. I said, let me just finish my thought. Shulchan echad is another issur. The issur shulchan echad is only when you have a table. So if there's no table, on the plane, everybody has their own table. You have this thing that pulls out and your own table. You're not eating a shulchan echad. I find it hard to accept that you're sitting in a car and they're all eating together in a car, which is mamash derech ha'oven v'reim, to sit and have pizza in the car together. I question if that would be mutter to us. Technically, it's not mamash. Well, if one of them driving, they're not eating. But I guess they are, yeah. But I'm told, so the difference of shulchan echad is only when there's a table. If one of them is not eating, weiter it's not called shulchan echad. If one of them is not eating. Another heter of shulchan echad is a heker, and there's a bunch of dinim of a heker. It says the halachic has to be between them, has to be high enough. You have to be able to notice it. It has to be something that's not normally on the table, at least not in this part of the table normally. There's another type of heker which is a mappa. A mappa doesn't have to be high. A mappa is something that you put underneath, like a placemat or no hefsek. It's a different din. Not medin heker, it's medin hefsek. So but I'm calling it heker for. And what people do when they're stuck, they're eating somewhere out, so they need to put down something. So they leave another challah, not a slice, a full challah. They leave an ashtray, they leave the kiddush wine, they leave the becher. You don't normally leave the becher when you're finished eating. I mean, of course, you have always these polite people that go, every heker, one after another, they take away. So you take away the bottle of wine, and you take away the extra lechem mishna challah. Then there's another thing called shirayim. About, yeah, if it's not being drunk from, yeah. You use it, now you're not using it anymore. Sorry? You finished the becher, now you're not drinking from it anymore. You leave it there. That's the standard heker that we tell people to use. If you're not eating by the table, it's not a problem. You're not drinking by the table. As long as you're not doing by the table. Then is the din of shiraim. Shiraim is the husband can have her shiraim, but shiraim means if it's hers specifically. So if there's a challah, that's for everyone. His butter, sugar, salt is something that's for everyone. And it's also the piece that she ate from. Shiraim has to do with mius, as I said, Tara Masber. So the piece she ate from, it's something that you would normally not give to another person, and the only reason you're eating it is because your wife. You won't normally take a piece of chicken that she ate from and say, oh, sure, you want to have here, I'll give you her chicken. So, but rice, even though there's 2,500 pieces of rice in the plate, you don't say, well, she only ate the first 15 pieces of rice. It's not called leftovers, because it's considered, it's ma'os in people's eyes. In a slice, it's what you bite from. But there's a lot of hatadim with shirayim Yossef. She only tasted from it. She walked away. Someone else ate in between. You don't know she ate from it. It was poured into something else. These are all the hatadim of shirayim. The problem is that I have to stop. There's many more halachos. I would strongly recommend, I urge, encourage, doesn't make a difference which sefer chazara that you use, which kulas and chumnis you take, as long as you know the basic halachos of Harchakos, because there's so much to it. But unfortunately, I have to stop, and we'll continue this some another time.
Rizge Shekayach to the Rav. Be with us next week, Bez Hashem, Wednesday evening, 8 o'clock, is going to be with Reb Usher Webb, the Rosh Kollel in Midtown Manhattan, on the process of Tara and Dinei Vestis, a chazar on that subject. Please be there, same time, same place. Shekayach for making it out. We'll have a mini might of them.